Good afternoon, and for the members of my declassified Caribbean channel, thank you so much for joining. And I am going to begin with a very important point here, Patois power and Jamaica's future. Now, is Patois allowed or to be allowed? It should be permitted in Jamaica's parliament. There's a lot of furor and drama surrounding that debate, and I'd like to participate in that debate. Now, recently there was a member of parliament in Jamaica's parliament, right? She is an MP, and I think she is a position MP on culture. And she stood up to make her sectoral presentation. And she started off in the Creole, in Jamaica's patois. And the Speaker of the House, which is who is rather not which, but who is the Prime Minister's wife, Juliet Holness, decided to stop her. And she was alluding to the fact that she was violating the standing order or the laws of the standing orders of the Parliament, of Jamaica's Parliament. Now, let's look at that sort of debate briefly, or the interaction between Holness and and I think it's Burchell. Her name is, if I'm correct. Let me get to that piece of information. So I'm going to share my screen with you immediately so that we can be a part of that conversation because we want to get the real facts, don't we? So where's the share screen? I am not seeing where I share my screen here. Share, and let's go there. Share the screen, and we are going to be looking at that conversation. I'm not sure it's taking this whole lot of time to get to where I'm looking to get to. But let's get to this. I can turn up the volume. It's sort of not getting, yeah, it's really trying to come together. Um, I might have to stop it. Do I have to stop it? Sharing, so that turn on the volume. But there was an interaction here. Let me see if I can turn up the volume and share it. I'm going to share it now. I can share the screen with you. This thing is sometimes very difficult to maneuver. So let me share my screen with you. Hope I'm not wasting your time. And it will come up now. Okay, so she is going to speak now in she's now going to speak in standard English, okay? Because that is what she's able to do, but she started off in the Jamaican Creole. Because in Jamaica's parliament, there's always drama. They do not have any sort of solutions to the intractable problems that bedevil Jamaica. So they have to create a lot of drama so that people can, their attention can be distracted and they can be engaged in anti-intellectual conversations that they are now engaged in. And our people love that. They love the gossips, they love the chatter that does not really matter. Now, let's look at patois. Patois is the heartbeat of Jamaica. It carries our history, our humor, our resilience, and the lived experience of the Jamaican people. It's not just a language, it is identity. So, I want to open with, up with that sort of statement because I want you to understand that I am not anti-patois. I speak it, love it, enjoy its humor, and I enjoy also its colorful, the way of coloring language. It is, in fact, one of the most colorful languages that you can ever speak. If you want to call it a dialect, but all languages are also dialect. People speak different dialect of each language. So we have the American dialect of English, we have the British dialect of English, and the Australian dialect. So we all speak dialects. But the question we have to ask ourselves, especially in a globalized, competitive, free market world, is whether our cultural expression alone is enough to carry us forward economically and institutionally. Because Jamaica does not operate in isolation, it operates inside a global system where English is the dominant language of trade, diplomacy, finance, technology, and international law. And people are going to say, yeah, here he goes again. Yes, because this is the reality. And a lot of times, the education system in Jamaica is not in the reality. It is still also a colonial one, should I remind you. Should I remind you? May I remind you, whether we're studying Patois or whatever language we're studying in Jamaica, the Jamaican education system is rooted and grounded in British colonialism. And now, might I say, we're seeing some also traction now there with American imperialism. So we are an imperial state, if it were. We still are colonized. We are not independent. Okay? Because if we were, then we wouldn't be with the IMF. We would not be having the Chinese and the Americans, taking us for fools. And we have to do whatever they tell us to do. Okay? So even major global powers that are non-English speaking like China, Russia, and much of Europe invest heavily in English education. So even the people that you call white, the Germans and the French and the Spanish, they also are compelled to learn English. And the more you speak English in their country with their native tongues, whether if you're in France, then it's French, or if you're in Spain, Spanish, or in Germany, German, they are coerced. They are compelled to speak the language. And the more fluid they are in the English language, the more they are going to be promoted and the better their job opportunities. Not because they are abandoning their identity as Germans or Spanish or French, but because they recognize the economic reality of global communication. And this has always been the history of mankind. Whatever empire is in operation, be they the Romans, Latin was the language of the time, people had to study it. And the dialects that they had around, yes, people spoke them, but they had to learn the language of the empire. Now, we talk about French and Spanish. Remember now that these, even in Spain, it wasn't one country. It was broken up into several countries before Ferdinand and, what's her name? Isabella decided to unite all those provinces, all those different parts and regions of Spain. And they spoke different languages, different dialects. But they were forced to speak Spanish, the Castilian language of the Queen, so that they could survive and that they could have one nation. They could have forged one nation. France was the same. So we need to understand that, yes, the world is not level, the world is not fair. Okay? But the fact of the matter is not going to be fair if we also do not try to equip ourselves with the necessary tools, including the linguistic tools, to be able to survive in this very difficult world. Okay? So we can say that these countries, learning English does not mean that they are abandoning their identity. Across Latin America as well, English is often treated as a gateway skill. In many cases, those who are proficient in English are able to move more quickly through socioeconomic ladder, gaining access to better jobs, international opportunities, and higher income mobility in their own country. In their own country. Now, Jamaica was a British colony. So why are we rejecting the language of the British Empire, which is now the language of the American Empire? And we know that we live close to the American Empire. We know that we have to do everything politically, economically, sometimes culturally of the Roman Empire, of the American Empire. And the American Empire speaks English. Many of us also live there in the United States, in Canada, in many of these English-speaking societies in which we have to communicate. So the question is not whether patois has value. It does. The question is whether limiting formal spaces to patois or resisting stronger integration with global English standards helps or hinders Jamaica's long-term development. And I would say it hinders because if we were really serious about literacy, we would have pushed the English language. But now that, we are clamoring that patois is our native tongue, and it might be. I'm not going to say that it is not. But we have to move away now because we understand that patois is not a global language. Neither is it respected. Now, you might say, what are you saying, Andrew? Because people, from the United States and other countries, they want to speak patois. They want to be Jamaican. They want to be Jamaican because it is cool. It's entertaining. But entertaining does not mean that they take it seriously. It's for entertainment. The wagwan for entertainment. But they're not going to engage you in very difficult economics and the rules and the policies. They're not going to engage you in the Jamaican Creole. Ask the hostesses when they go to the IMF or when the IMF team visits them if they're using any Jamaican local dialect. Or if the IMF, when it sends its representative to Jamaica, is one of the requirements is for them to learn Jamaican Creole to be able to understand and to explicate IMF policies. They're going to tell you that that is not a requirement. Very important that you understand that. So is English in this context a tool of cultural replacement, or is it a tool of upward social mobility? Right? And that is what we need to understand. It's not replacing our culture, because our culture can also be expressed in English. A language is only a tool. It is not colonization. Yes, it can be used. And patois can also be used as a tool of colonization too. Because if your leaders want to colonize you into poverty, which most of Jamaica is a poor country, so we have used the patois tool to have colonized us into a mindset of poverty and social backwardness. Okay? Because let's just be clear, patois does not have any intellectual stuff. Apart from a few poems and music written there, it is not a tool of global refinement. It's the language of refinement. And that is why Jamaica is known to be a crass, boorish, and backward society. It is not cultured. And that is what we have to understand. It's not a literate society, because it was a plantation language. And let me say something to you. All languages, including English language, when you go to the United States, they have different dialects of the American dialect of English. But there is a certain dialect that is accepted that Americans also have to agree that this is how they should sound. Black Americans speak a different dialect of English. They're what we call Black English. But the fact of the matter is that if they are going to progress, they have to adapt, all right? And they have to code switch, as Jamaicans do, if they are going to be successful. Okay? So we need to get out of this sort of anti-intellectual discourse in which we are suggesting that we have to normalize Creole, because nobody's going to respect us for normalizing it. We are not going to function in this global village if we normalize it. Yes, we can continue to use it informally for entertainment, for personal conversations, but not for global conversations as we are functioning in a global economy. And if you want to make it a respected language, where are the scientists who have written prolifically in that language, Jamaican dialect? Where are the economists? Okay? And we can refer to lots of other areas of scholarship and intellectual endeavors. We don't have them. And the people like the Carolyn Coopers who are speaking nonsense and who seem to be losing her mind, because if she understands, the Bible says in, I think it was the wisest man that ever lived, King Solomon, that a little knowledge might be dangerous. And I think that a little knowledge for a lot of Jamaicans is dangerous because we're using that little knowledge that God has blessed us with as a curse, as a tool of curse, because we are not wise. We are not prudent in our interpretation of how we should develop that island nation. Now, there was an article coming out of IRFM, right? And I think in which Karen Cooper was speaking. Tension in Gordon House after MP Birchel's patois addressing sparks language debate in Parliament. Right? So we're going to debate that now. It's going to become a 9-day wonder on to another drama, because that's what Jamaica is all about. That is what Jamaica is all about. Nothing going on. There's no productivity. All we like to do is the cascas, because this is no intellectual debate, by the way. This is just cascas. There was tension in Gordon House yesterday owing to a debate between government and opposition members of Parliament, MPs, over language, culture, and parliamentary procedures. It began after opposition spokesperson Creative Industries, Culture and Information, Nikisha Birchall, commenced her maiden sectoral debate presentation in Jamaican Patois. House Speaker Juliet Holness then interrupted Birchall and pointed out that the English language should be used in keeping with the standing orders. If those are the rules of the standing orders, why not follow them? Because what example are we setting for our young people when we're telling them that they have to wear a certain hairstyle? We're telling them that they have to be dressed a certain way. We're telling them that they have to write a certain way. We're telling them that they have to address their professors a certain way. What about this Professor Carolyn Cooper? Why just call her Carolyn? Okay? Since we want to get there, why don't live with the language of, we're all the same on the plantation. So I can just say Carolyn Cooper. Right? Why didn't she have her children? And I'm sure if they told her, Dr. Carolyn Cooper, she wanted to hear professor. We love the titles, and that is also a matter of colonialism. All right? Because many white people just call them, oh, David, how are you, David, even though they have their PhDs. Okay? But we like to apply rules when we think it is convenient to us and when we want to elevate ourselves. And this is what Carolyn Cooper has elevated herself in Jamaica in the wrong way. The speaker's intervention immediately triggered murmurs before erupting into a brief exchange between members on both sides of the aisle. Government MPs rallied behind Mrs. Holness's enforcement of parliamentary rules, insisting that the standing orders must be upheld regardless of the circumstances. Opposition members, however, pushed back, arguing that Miss Birchall, she's not Mrs., but Miss Birchall, should have been allowed to speak in Patois, the language understood by the majority of the population. Now, they're telling us what people in Jamaica understand, and it's not true that they don't understand English, okay? It might be that they might understand some of the high, flown words, the words that are very difficult, advanced vocabulary, all right, and jargons. They might not be able to understand that. But generally speaking, Jamaicans understand English. Okay? In fact, when you go online, there was a guy on TikTok who keeps on talking about Jamaica as the capital of the Caribbean, talking nonsense about, oh, Jamaica is the capital of the Caribbean, and he's telling why it is. And one of the reasons he listed why he considers Jamaica to be the capital of the Caribbean is that we understand Creole and understand English, right? And he was speaking in Creole. But he says that one of the characteristics of Jamaica is that they understand English as well as the local Jamaican dialect, right? They sit and they watch the news and they can tell you what is happening and all of that. They might not report it back in English, in standard English, but they know what is going on. Yesterday, I was also on TikTok scrolling. I saw this lady, I think her name is Lady Grab a Cook or whatever her name is. And there were people on her live, probably two people on her live, and they were talking about what was happening in Jamaica. And they expressed exactly what the parliamentarians are saying. Somebody was saying, "Go and read Nara, because Nara is taking away our rights," and they weren't expressing all of that in English. All right, they were expressing it in the Jamaican dialect because they understand and they read the Nara bill. Right, so we are underestimating because that is how the politicians play. They want to underestimate the intelligence of the Jamaican people. But if we should challenge our Jamaican people to learn English and to learn standard English, then the country would have been more progressive. But we don't want the country to be progressive. The leaders, the politicians of Jamaica, are happy when they can use their colonial sticks at the people. And I agree with Mrs. Juliet Holdes that the standing orders, the rules should be obeyed. Right? Now, if there were this sort of advanced vocabulary language being used and people don't understand, then people can say, "Can you explain?" So that the Jamaican people can understand. I don't think the people of my constituency would understand what you have just said, and that's different. Okay? But to suggest that you have to speak in the Jamaican Creole for the Jamaican people to understand, you are insulting the intelligence of the Jamaican people, and you should be put out of parliament. You're not representatives of the Jamaican people. All right? There is a time and place for everything under the sun. A time to wear jeans and a time not to wear jeans. A time to wear uniforms and a time not to wear uniforms. And if we're going to behave like that as adults, particularly in Jamaica's parliament, then what message are we sending to our students who are often challenging the rules in schools and in other formal spaces? Okay? Jamaica is already aligned with the global economic model, the neoliberal system, international trade frameworks, tourism markets, and foreign investment structures. If that is the case, then language becomes more than culture. It becomes infrastructure. That does not mean Jamaica should reject its heritage. Far from it. Patois should be embraced, preserved, and respected as a core part of the national identity. But there is a difference between cultural pride and institutional functionality. A nation can celebrate its language while still ensuring its formal systems are aligned with global standards that allow its people to compete, communicate, and succeed internationally. And notice here I'm using the term internationally because Jamaica lacks that international perspective. The real danger is not cultural pride. It is when cultural debates become disconnected from economic and social reality, when symbolism replaces strategy, when identity becomes separated from development. I'm going to repeat that. The real danger is not cultural pride. It is when cultural debates, and I'm saying cultural cascades, become disconnected from economic and social reality. When symbolism replaces strategy, when identity becomes separated from development. And I think the last here, our identity is replacing national development. We are allowing, oh, it's because Patois is tied to my identity. And when we look at the country, we see a backward nation. a nation that is still built on the plantation economics and social realities. The challenge for Jamaica is not choosing between Patois and English. The real challenge is finding a balance where cultural identity is protected, but national progress is not slowed by internal contradictions. And we can, of course, exalt our Louise Bennett for being that sort of standard bearer, where she was fluid in the Creole as well as fluid in standard Jamaican English, right? And that's what we call it. We say that it is standard Jamaican English, right? We didn't say it's British. We have adapted the language to suit our realities, and for that reason, it is not colonial because we have adapted it. We have made it reflect our realities. Okay? And there's no, when we think of the beauty of English language spoken with a Jamaican accent, it is one of the most beautiful sounds that you can hear. And yet we don't want to appreciate it. Okay? And we're losing out in the market. What if we had really formulated, what if we had nurtured, that's a better word, a society in which people, the large majority of Jamaicans, spoke English? Do you know how many Chinese would be there right now sending their children to Jamaica to learn English? Okay? And other countries. We could be a huge market for English learners, foreign those who are studying English as a second language. We can't do that now because the majority of our people, they would understand what they're saying. Okay? They would not understand what they are saying. But we have given up all of those markets, okay, in defense of a sterile national identity. That is not even giving us anything. That has no respectability there. Nobody respects us. Okay? Nobody respects us. They fawn over our music and so forth for entertainment, for purposes of entertainment. Okay? Nobody's going to respect you because you have the fastest man on the earth. Entertainment. Okay? We have to rethink our position, and we have to think more critically, which we can't because the education system has not really nurtured that sort of thinking. Let us just look at some of the things that Karen Cooper is saying, because she is a very contradictory woman. Okay? Ms. Burchell later defended her decision to begin her presentation in Patois, arguing that the subject matter itself made the choice appropriate. She then stated that she would deliver her remarks in standard English. Meantime, Professor of Literary and Cultural Studies, these wonderful names, at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Dr. Carolyn Cooper, well, doesn't say Carolyn Cooper, says the controversy surrounding the use of Jamaican Patois in Parliament highlights the need for changes to the standing orders. But it has not yet changed. So they have to be respected. The same thing, Carolyn Cooper, for students. If they have to dress a certain way, if the rules are the rules until the rules are changed, that is how they have to be dressed. You were, or probably, I don't know if you're still a professor at the University of the West Indies, but there is a certain decorum in the classroom. I'm sure that you would want to happen. I'm sure that if you're teaching English, which in your mind is a colonial language, you don't want your students coming there and speaking Jamaican Creole. All right? You want them to speak English. So why not just say that it's a native language? And whether they're in English class or they're wherever they are, they can speak it. And they should not aim to master standard English. Why just not say that? Because it's their identity. And their identity supersedes national development and academic mobility and success. Speaking with RFM's host, Muta Baruka, on the Stepping Razor this afternoon, Dr. Cooper argued that the current rules fails to reflect the linguistic reality of the country. Okay, so because it's a reality, so because everybody's poor, it means therefore that the people should have this poor mindset and they should not find ways and means of attaining some form of wealth and prosperity because we are suffering. This is the sort of implied meaning of Carolyn Cooper. She said it cannot be acceptable for the language spoken by the majority of Jamaicans to be allowed in the nation's parliament. Okay? Dr. Cooper further argued that the issue points to what she describes as a long-standing lack of respect for the Jamaican people. So why didn't Carolyn Cooper develop a curriculum or a curricular at the University of the West Indies in which all of the careers there that are being taught, that are being practiced, whatever, why didn't they write them in the Creole? Why didn't she do that? Because that is the Jamaica's reality. All right. She noted that many people still dismiss Patois as broken English instead of recognizing it as a language in its own right. What does that have to do with anything? The fact is it a tool, whether it's broken English or it is a language in and of itself? That is not the debate, or that should not be the debate. The language is Patois a tool of national development, of operating in this global economy, in this global economic infrastructure? That should be the question. That is what you call, Karen Cooper, intellectualism. That is what we call intellectual debate. And you were a professor of English at University of the West Indies. And this is the level of debate that you are bringing to RFM. Okay? It is sad. And I've met Carolyn Cooper. I saw her at the conference I told you before on this platform. And her aggression. I mean, she doesn't want to be engaged in debate. She wants to show and to wield her power in any sort of discussion of the Jamaican Creole. She's emotional. She's emotionally charged about it. And the other side, she behaves as if she is the scholar. She is the intellectual on the Jamaican Creole. Right? And I'm not sure what linguistic book she has written. She's just talking. Right? She's just talking, and people respect her in Jamaica. She might not be an internationally respected professor, but she's respected in Jamaica because people don't know how to think. I remember when I went to the conference and her students were there defending every word she was saying. And she was like, shutting down any other conversation that contradicts what she says. This is the level of intellectual discourse we have at the University of the West Indies. Right? And this was a so-called intellectual conference. And people were not given the opportunity to express another version of the reality. And Professor Carolyn Cooper is not living in the reality. I can tell you that. So she went on the program and she spoke her nonsense. Now listen to Carolyn Cooper here. Let me see if I can share the screen and see how she's extremely a contradictory person. Now this is Lisa Hanna. It seems that they were at a women's conference in Jamaica. And in recent times, people are saying that Lisa Hanna, former Miss World, Miss Jamaica World, and she was also Miss World in 1993, wearing bikinis, and she's now 50, going 51, and people have been, lambasting her, criticizing her for her skimpily clad bikini on the beach at 50. But this is what she's saying, and listen to Carolyn Cooper because she's a part of this discourse. Let me see if I can get the sound. Am I getting the sound? No, I'm not getting the sound. Wow. I'm not. Okay. Why is it not sound getting thing now? Let me see if I can. Wow. Yeah, I might not be able to get this guy, so let me see if I could try again. I don't know why this thing is taking a long time. I don't want this. Yeah, but in that discourse, right? In that, I don't think I'm going to be able to get it. Okay, in that discourse, Caroline Cooper was telling her that she was, I wanted to get it, and it's just gone. I don't know why it's not um continue. Let me write continue. It's just not. It's not able to come. So I'm not going to fight with it. I'm not going to fight with it. Yeah, I'm not going to fight with it, ladies and gentlemen, because it's just not coming. But she was questioning Lisa Hanna about her maybe slightly pornographic display wearing bikinis, right? This is Caroline Cooper talking to her. I'm sorry I wasn't able to show you the video, okay? And what she's saying, what Lisa Hanna's retort was, okay, so it wasn't a pornographic display when I was on display right there at Miss World in 1993, displaying bikinis and waving the Jamaican flag. That wasn't a slight pornography, right? It wasn't. But now that she's 50, it is because she's wearing a bikini. Now, what you might agree or disagree with how Lisa Hanna is carrying herself as a 50-year-old woman. That's not up for. I'm not here to debate that. I'm just showing you how Caroline Cooper, she nitpicks at what she wants to nitpick at, and she defends what she wants to defend. And her thing is to defend the Jamaican Creole, while she is a master of speaking English language. But she wants her Jamaican brothers and sisters to remain on the plantation so that she can be respected and that she can use a tool over them. Because she knows that a person, if she comes with me and we're debating, that she's not going to win the conversation. She knows that. So she has to have people there who are controllable, right? And that is what she's doing. Because you're going to behave as if, yeah, she has a tool of education. And we know that no matter what we want to think, even our parents of yesteryear, when they sent us to school, they send us because they wanted us to be better. And when we returned home, even though they perhaps could not speak a word of English, some of them could, right? But they would say, if they hear us speaking a certain way, why am I spending so much money on you and you are speaking in the way? Because they understand that the Creole represents a certain social class and economic class, a certain socio-economic class. And Caroline Cooper, because she's selfish, because she's a pseudo-intellectual, and many of them who are there representing that class at the University of the Western Linguistics Department, they want Jamaica and Jamaicans to remain as a backward state in which the majority of our people, her brothers and sisters, remain linguistically incompetent and not being able to express themselves in the global language, which is English and not Jamaican Creole. I wonder if she understands that. Well, she's traveled, so she should. Okay? Because, we're living in a world driven by trade, technology, and global mobility. Language is not just expression, it is access. Access to markets, access to educational institutions, access even to the digital world. Okay? It is. And the question Jamaica must answer is simple. How do we preserve who we are without limiting where we can go? And at the moment, we have not moved on. Since independence, our economy has not grown consistently. We haven't achieved as much as we think we have. It's because many of our people have left. Yesterday, I spoke about the brain drain. Okay? So we can sit there and think and live in our la la land, right? With our fastest man on earth and Jamaican music to the world, and you know, we're living in a social and economic depraved society. What do we want out of life? Are we even ambitious anymore? And language, and language is a tool of upward social mobility, whether we like it or not. And it also shows our ability of progress and portrays our ambitious nature or lack thereof. You decide. Do you want to continue a backward social and economic society, or do you want to progress? Well, we have to use the tools. And if Carolyn Cooper and all of these pseudo intellectuals in Jamaica, the University of the West Indies, at the linguistics department, if you want to change the world, then let's begin with economics. Get rid of the neoliberal economic model that we're using in Jamaica and the colonial British education system that we're using from infant school right up to the university level. And then we'll be able to have an intellectual discourse. Until then, all of what you're having down there is cascas and should be really had at the plantation level. Thank you so much for joining. See you in another one. Ciao.